Hi, this is Dana. Welcome to the Divination for Liberation podcast. I'm here with your divination for the full moon in Sidereal Scorpio. The 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide says, fiercely protecting with pride. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know. Welcome. If you are here for the first time, I'm so happy to have you. And if you are an OG who's been riding with me for the past year, as I've been sharing this podcast on my Podia, the Divination for Liberation Podia, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with me for so long. And you all make some room in the pews for the saints who are late, but we won't shame them. We're going to make space for them and welcome them just like they've been family all the time. Listen, I have been thinking so much about this podcast episode because this is the one where, I'm finally making it available to the public. So I'm a little bit self-conscious because I've been in my little closed community. But also because of what I had written about this full moon in the 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide, Fiercely Protecting with Pride. I swear to you, it did not dawn on me that this full moon would be occurring during Pride Month. Honestly, it did not occur to me. I just be doing the div for lib math. Those who know that right now Mars is in Sidereal Leo. And the sign Leo is about self-respect and dignity and pride. It is about a radical self-acceptance that does not necessarily require other people to participate in it. It's about a self-assertion that pushes forward this authentic self, even in the face of people being like, who do you think you are? That is so much what pride is about when we get to June and the LGBTQ community is celebrating the history of resistance and that fierce protection of their pride in themselves in the face of societal shame, family shame, cultural shame. And so this full moon is a celebration of pride, but particularly in this moment where corporations and our government and even members of our own community have taken off their masks, where they were pretending that they really were about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as soon as the Cheeto head clown one got into office and said, hey, we're not doing that anymore, everybody's like, whew, thank God, I don't have to pretend like I like the gays anymore. Right. And so it's this way that, regardless of the societal current, regardless of whether it is in vogue or out of vogue to be your authentic self, pride says be yourself anyhow. Right. And it is in those spaces that we gather in community with each other, those who are a part of the community, the LGBT community, and those of us who are not a part of that community, we still celebrate because we know that LGBTQ folks, and especially trans folks, I talked about this in the new moon in Taurus, they are leading the revolution. They are showing the rest of us what it's like to reject these systems, reject these hierarchies, and most importantly, to reject external definitions of who we are that contradict our subjective experience of ourselves. And that's really what this full moon is about. It is about how can you stand in the authenticity of who you are in alignment with your internal subjective felt sense of who you are, even when somebody outside of you is telling you that you're somebody else. It's such a hard contradiction to stand in. It's a hard contradiction to navigate because, the inclination is to want to please people sometimes, right? And we please people by concealing the parts of ourselves that do not fit and conform to the assignments that we've been given. And also that concealment is survival. Sometimes it is not safe physically for you to show your authentic self, whether you are LGBTQ or not. In this moment, at this full moon, another thing that's going on is we've seen resistance of uprisings in Minneapolis. We've seen them in Chicago. We've seen them in LA, trying to run ICE out of town as ICE is terrorizing not only the immigrant community, but those who are in community with the immigrant community. Such a courageous display of fierce pride that we've seen folks express as they are saying, hey, who do you think you're talking to? Who do you think you're treating that way? And if you go back and listen to the episode from 2 weeks ago for the new moon in Taurus, I talked about Mars and Leo being an incredible turning point for the year 2025 because it's coming on the heels of this moment where sidereal Taurus has been ruling the sky via Jupiter in Taurus, which is no longer there as of, what was that? May 14th, I believe. And Taurus is the sign of belonging, and it encourages us to magnify our commonalities and minimize our differences. This doesn't mean the nature of who we are changes. It means that the external expression and performance of who we are changes to conform to the norms of a group. Right. And often in this time, we associate with people, ideas, convictions, beliefs, and principles that aren't necessarily a reflection of our own experience and what we believe. There might be a way that the group we belong to brings a benefit to us that overrides the necessity to show up authentically. And I think Taurus is this sign, that does help us to reconcile those innate contradictions that say that, like, you can't show your real self everywhere. Okay. You cannot show your real self everywhere. Sometimes you have to conceal your real self. Or, we talk about trans people and gender conforming or gender affirming, rather, treatments and surgeries and things like that, as if trans people are the only ones that do them. No, everyone does gender affirming things because to belong in the male gender group or the female gender group is to minimize the aspects of ourselves that don't conform to the female gender and or male gender, and to exaggerate or maximize or bring the focus on the aspects of ourself that do conform to the female or male gender or whatever group we identify with. But the important piece is understanding that this concealment is for our own sense of belonging, but it's also for our safety. It's also for our safety in the sense that there are real consequences for not conforming to the norm. There are real life or death consequences for not conforming to the norm of genders. We've seen cisgender women be targeted because people think they're trans women because of whatever way they're too tall or their voice are too deep or they're more muscular in their stature. And these are seen as things that don't conform to the female gender, right? And so they become things that can be something that elicits a violent response from other people. So all of that to say, definitely standing in solidarity with the LGBTQ community for leading the charge of resistance that does ultimately break down these binaries and structures that are oppressive to all of us. Something else that's really important at this full moon with Mars and Leo, it's a full moon in Scorpio, is this sense of dignity and self-respect. Part of the opportunity that Leo brings us at this full moon is that sometimes your proximity and association with a person or group is making a statement about who you are that you don't want to be made. Prior to Mars and Leo, the current of society, the current of the zeitgeist was that there were more benefits to be had by concealing the parts of yourself that don't align with the group So that meant that sometimes you were associated with people and things that you really didn't agree with. I think there is nothing more exemplary of this than the very public conflict between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Now, before I go into this, let me just say this real quick. Let me just get this off my chest real quick. I know that there is a lot of skepticism around whether or not this is a real conflict and whether or not this is a part of a larger conspiracy to make JD Vance the president or whatever it may be. And I just really think that you give these people too much credit. I've said from the beginning that one, the alliances that we see on the right are alliances of convenience. They don't actually share convictions or principles. They have a shared goal that does not necessarily require shared principles or convictions. And as an aside, this is the very thing that those of us who are down with the cause of liberation need to accept and understand at a very deep level. That you do not have to agree with people. It is more important that you have a shared goal. Yes, sometimes there are theoretical, principle, political disagreements that can undermine the shared goal. But you know, if somebody's really down, when they can actually set that aside and move towards the shared goal. And then once you reach the goal, then you can have some conversations and, preserve the important distinctions and differences that are related to your convictions and beliefs and ideologies, right? But this is the important thing. So when we look at the breakdown between Trump and Musk's relationship, what we're really looking at is that the shared goal is no longer glue enough to override the distinctions in their beliefs and their principles. Because the breakdown is really about uh, Elon Musk's is really trying to grift from the government in a way of shutting down government run departments and programs so that they can be privatized and he financially benefits from them. So he feels like the bill that Trump has put forward, the budget bill, is increasing the deficit too much and it's not reaching that ultimate goal, right? Um, so I've said from the beginning that there was a weakness in the right because the shared goal that they have is not enough to override their differences, right? And for Musk and Trump, they are equally wealthy and powerful. Um, and Trump has really met his match, his ultimate enemy. The other thing that I've often said about Trump is that um, he has a natal promise in his birth chart where friends become enemies. We've seen it over and over and over again. People who were in the most trusted inner circle of Trump get ousted, get very publicly humiliated, get their reputations destroyed. They have been attacked by Trump with litigation, expensive litigation. This is the natal promise of Trump because he does not have any loyalties to anyone except those who tell him how, tell him what he wants to hear, and those who make him feel what he wants to feel. And the minute that you stop telling Trump what he wants to hear about himself and you stop making him feel how he wants to feel, you are out of there. You're fired, right? That was his phrase on The Apprentice. It's so important to be able to see the macro level, big picture, cultural things that are going on and make connections to how those apply to us personally. I think that this moment is giving us a real challenge around what is the glue that holds our relationships together, whether they be romantic, intimate, professional, or platonic, familial. How much of that glue has required you to put up with disrespect and disregard? How much of that glue has required you to be associated with people who are not on what you're on, who aren't in alignment with how you want to be represented and how you want to be known in the world? Leo is this sign that asks us this question of, how do you want to be known? When people think of you, how is it that you want them to think of you? When you are no longer physically in front of somebody's face, what are the thoughts and feelings that they have of you? And some people really struggle with this. And they struggle with it across this spectrum where, on the one hand, you have people who are too identified with a version of them that exists in the minds of other people. Trump is the ultimate of this. He is so trapped in what he thinks other people are thinking and saying about him that he is creating a whole apparatus of surveillance so that he can check people's phones at the borders. Have you said mean things about me? Have you talked shit about me? Have you, where do you stand on Palestine, right? Like his sense of self is so completely outside of his own center, outside of his own mind and imagination, that he has to keep tabs on the whole world to police and monitor what they might be saying about him. Now, before y'all go too tough on Trump, some of y'all are like that too. Some of you all are so afraid of what people think about you. And I don't mean this in the sense of like a high school or childlike way. I mean it in the sense of your perception of yourself is so hypercritical, and your environment that you were raised in focused so much on criticism and scrutiny that you really struggle to tell the difference between what are thoughts you are having about yourself and what are thoughts other people are having about you. Did y'all get that? Can you tell the difference between thoughts you are having about yourself and thoughts other people are having about you? When you cannot tell that difference, you automatically assume that people are judging you in the way that you judge yourself. You automatically assume that the things that you are most insecure about are the very things that everybody is judging and thinking about. And you know what? Sometimes they are. Sometimes there is a way that you don't conform to the beauty standards in your culture. And when you go out in public, people are definitely looking at you. But do you have to look at yourself the way that they look at you? Do you have to see and know yourself in the same way that other people are seeing and knowing you? Yes, on a certain level, it's kind of like you got to know how you look to other people so that you can navigate the world in a way that leads to your safety and less harm if you can help it. But also self-determination, where the North Node is, that's Aquarius, Sidereal Aquarius. Self-determination says to know myself for myself. This is in opposition to, or on the other end of the spectrum of Leo, right? That is centered on the representations of them that exist outside in the world in the form of images and thoughts in other people's mind, right? So the other end of this spectrum is people who don't know what they look like at all. Ooh, I really want to share this example, but I love this particular actor. And so I'm not going to say their name. I enjoy everything I've ever watched that they've been in. And so I'm not going to say their name, but I'm going to say this. And some people might know who I'm talking about, and that's that. But very recently, this actor whose work I love and enjoy was on the cover. I want to say it was like the Hollywood Reporter or something like that. They were on the cover of this magazine with several other actors. And the actor in question is Black. And every other actor on this cover was white. Same gender, but they were all white. And I thought to myself, like, nobody looked at this cover with this Black person sitting in the middle, surrounded by like 5 or 6 white people, as like this statement about who is making moves in this particular part of Hollywood. Nobody looked at that picture and thought, ooh. Or even this Black person at the center of this photo did not recognize what it was going to look like to be in this image where you're surrounded by white people. And I thought to myself, I said, where is the sidereal Aquarius in this person's chart? I really think they're sidereal Aquarius rising, because they also said some other things later in the interview that was like their vision of themselves as an actor in the future was 2 white people. And so, like, but that's the other end of the spectrum, that like, I understand the power of self-determination, because self-determination is how we survive the ridicule and the oppression and the constant force of empire trying to tell us who we are in ways that contradict how we feel. And self-determination is so important in that journey of self-discovery and self-knowledge and self-description expression. However, y'all know what I'm talking about when y'all be on Hinge and you see a Black person, and in every single one of their photos, they are the only Black person. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And for me, this is like, do you know what you look like? Not really, do you know that you're Black, but do you understand optics? Do you understand the representation of yourself that you're projecting out into the world? Are you really thinking about how you want to be known? And like, I understand anti-Blackness very well. I understand that Blackness is death. I understand the survival impulse to distance oneself from Blackness, regardless of your race or ethnicity, because to be in proximity to Blackness in white supremacy society is to be in closer proximity to death. So, at the end of the day, I get it's survival, right? I know this actor is making a lot of money doing things with white people because white people fund white people stuff. I just saw Sherry Shepherd in an interview. I think it was for the film Straw, that's written and produced by Tyler Perry. And Sherry Shepherd and Taraji P. Henson both said, no, Taraji P. Henson said that every single raise that she's gotten as an actor came from Tyler Perry. Right? So I get it. Like, if you really want that money, if you want that guap. But this takes us back to what this full moon is about: fiercely protecting with pride, protecting your body, protecting your sense of self, protecting your reputation, protecting your neighbor, protecting the group you belong with, protecting the group that you see is being harmed or oppressed, fiercely protecting with pride. Because what does it say about you to leave this particular thing exposed? What are the consequences to not protecting this thing and leaving it exposed and vulnerable? Let's pause here and we'll come back with some tarot shortly. All right, we're back with the tarot. And here on the Divination for Liberation podcast, after we break down the astrology, how it's relating to current events and how that might trickle down into the personal aspects of our lives, we pull some tarot cards because tarot has this beautiful and lovely symbolism that can offer us guidance and insight for navigating this moment of the full moon, all of the ways that it expands out into longer, cycles of time. And of course, the next 2 weeks when we get to a new moon. So we're starting with the sun. And I really don't know what card would better exemplify the fact that this full moon in Scorpio is ruled by Mars in Leo. The sun is this card that is affirming the fact that what you are looking at is exactly what it is. There's no hidden thing here. The lights are fully on. This thing is illuminated in a way that says what you see is what you get. I think also this is almost like a different type of sobriety. There's a sobriety that's like not being under the influence of a substance, right? But I also think there's a sobriety, particularly in this moment, that is about not being under the influence of internalized doubt and self-doubt that makes you distrust what you are seeing and perceiving and experiencing. I think this is a really sensitive balance because there are other things going on in the sky right now that are about not taking things at face value and understanding the deeper connections between things that aren't apparent. But at this moment, full moons are, when you look at the 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide, or any astrology guide for that matter that I've put out over the past 8 years, when you get to a full moon, I often say seeing clearly, because it is at the full moon where we can experience the light of the sun. Because you can't look at the sun. You can't look directly at it. It's too bright. It'll burn your eyeballs. Your cornea's not going to like it. And so full moons are ways for us to indirectly perceive the light of the sun. Let me just give y'all a little metaphysical physics thing here real quick. The sun is our ultimate light. It is a necessary component of growth. In metaphysics, in Divination for Liberation, Sidereal Astrology, the sun represents that which we are conscious of, that which is known, that which is visible. But a thing is visible because it is reflecting the light of the sun. It is not the sun. It is reflecting the light of the sun. And so it is in moments of illumination, right? When we think of the Enlightenment period of European history, right? We're thinking of the lights coming on and things that were previously dark, meaning things that were previously not conscious in the human psyche, things that we did not know or were not aware of, suddenly were illuminated for the Europeans because they came into contact with some folks who knew better. That's a whole other story for a whole other time, right? Because while the Europeans were in enlightenment, folks on the continent, folks in, South America, indigenous folks all over the Americas were not in the dark ages, okay? They had already been washing their asses and knew that you probably needed to do certain things to avoid infection, so on and so forth, right? But I say all of that to say that when we come to a full moon, it is the moon being illuminated because there's an unobscured reflection of the light of the sun. Just like if it's light outside where you are, everything you're seeing as evidence of the sun's illumination. So if we translate this to, metaphysics, we can think about our consciousness illuminating and bringing something into our conscious awareness, our minds illuminating something and bringing it into our conscious awareness. And this is why I do the new and full moon readings, because it helps us understand this cycle of darkness and illumination. It helps us understand and have language for what is emerging in our consciousness for new awareness in this time and season and in this moment and in this part of the cycle. And in this time and season, the sun card is saying what you see is what you get. You really got to open your eyes, keep the lights on, and don't hide from the truths that are being revealed to you right now about yourself, about your circumstances, and about other people in your life. All right. We've got the 9 of Pentacles and we got the 8 of Pentacles. Okay. So Pentacles are about the material world. They are about the material circumstances, resources, and well-being, not only in an external sense of having enough money and food and shelter, a means to making a living, and other material goods that you might need to have a solid quality of life. But it also talks about the material well-being of our bodies and our health in a holistic sense of mind and body, emotionally, mentally, right? So when we get to the 9 of Pentacles, there is this sense of having enough. And immediately what I'm hearing is like, you don't need any more evidence to prove that the truth you know about yourself is true. I don't know who that was for. You do not need any more evidence. How you know yourself, how you see yourself, yep, that's exactly who you are. You have enough. And there are certain ways that I think we can get caught up on preemptively anticipating other people's rejection of the truth we know to be true about ourselves. We got the judge and jury going in our mind and the attorney in our mind, putting the case together just in case we have to defend who we are to someone. That we have to, file a motion and to establish a precedent so that should anybody come and tell me I'm not who I am, I already got this case set up to convince them. And the question that I have for you is, who told you that experiencing yourself and knowing yourself in a certain way is not enough evidence to prove to you that you're seeing yourself clearly? I think it's so interesting because there are some people who really do not care. There are some people who really do not give a fuck. They will walk around like saying all types of things about who they are, having the most audacious audacity ever. They will go for jobs or try to, execute some physical feat or embark upon some project. And they don't for once think that they don't know enough to do it. And if they do think they don't know enough, they don't care. They're like, I'll figure it out as I go. They don't have any self-doubt. They understand that confidence is not something that you have before you do the hard thing. Confidence is something that you get through the process of doing the hard thing, whether or not you achieve the hard thing. Confidence is not a prerequisite for showing up as your authentic self in your life, in your relationships, and in this world. Confidence is the gift you get from doing that thing. So if you're waiting for the feeling to arise where suddenly you're like, yes, I am. Yes, I can. I'm sorry, it's not coming. There are some things that you learn by doing. There are some fruits that you only get in the process. And confidence is one of those things. Confidence is also this thing that requires repetition. Because repetition is saying over and over and over again, I'm willing to try. And as I try, I'm refining my skill and I'm getting better. And I'm learning to overcome the internal resistance that says I'm not good enough. Those are all the component pieces of confidence. So when I think back to this interpretation for the full moon from the 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide that says, fiercely protecting with pride, it makes me think about the theme of the eclipses that we just are moving into in Sidereal Leo and Aquarius that says, whose vision determines what you see? Whose gaze, whose lens are you looking through in order to forecast the possibilities of life for you? Whose precedent are you allowing to predetermine your possibilities? Whew, okay, I'm preaching. Whose precedent are you allowing to predetermine your possibilities? This is where we have to do this very delicate dance between belonging and separateness, togetherness and separateness, closeness and distinctions. That if the group is the only thing determining your possibilities, that is loss of self. And so this full moon is trying to get you to get yourself back. We've got the 8 of Pentacles, and I feel like I really just preached through that thing right here because the 8 of Pentacles is this card about repetition. It is about how action, not singular, but action repeated builds upon itself over time. And that is where you reach the productivity of an action or you reach the potential of what an action can bring for you. So I want you to understand that confidence is both internal and external. And I'm using confidence as like a stand-in for pride here. Confidence is both socially built and it is also internally fueled. Your confidence cannot be completely reliant upon people outside of you holding it for you. Because as soon as they decide to put it down, you feel like shit. So there has to be an internal anchor and center that confidence is rooted in. Sometimes with Leo, I talk about the coping strategy of Leo in my Wounds and Gifts workshop as hubris and arrogance. And as a fire sign, all fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, have in common that they cope with their experiences by exaggerating their self-image and their capabilities. One of the ways that I often see this playing out is with Black folks. I love Black women. I love Black people. I love us. Okay. But there is a way that we're constantly trying to shield and protect ourselves. And I'm not judging. We constantly try to shield and protect ourselves from the way that whiteness is constantly trying to put us in our place by exaggerating who we are. We were kings and queens. No. You worked with iron and you made baskets and you and the other folks in your community tended to the rice paddies, okay? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But understand that we exaggerate who we are as a protection from external forces of oppression telling us we aren't enough. And so, in that sense, we never really get a realistic sense of who we are in this authentic way. We come up with terms like Black excellence as something that we need to live up to and into to overcompensate for all the ways that whiteness says you're not excellent. And so I want you to take that regardless of your race or gender and class and understand it this way. How much of how you think about yourself is a reaction to who other people are saying who you are, and not growing from an internal, authentic experience of yourself and what you are naturally gravitating towards, what you naturally feel good doing and being. There's something very childlike in this that, when you tell a child they can't do something, I'm going to show you. Right? Teenagers, they get this very rebellious stage because that is the stage at which you are separating your perception of the world and developing your own context so that that can inform the choices that you make, and you're not just relying on an inherited context or meaning or reality that's external to you. But if you're stuck in that stage where who you are is mostly just a reaction to proving to somebody else, proving that what somebody else has to say about you is not who you are, right? That could be a little childish. And it's a natural step, don't get me wrong. But you're missing an opportunity for real authenticity, confidence, and fulfillment when that's the space that you're moving from. Fiercely protecting with pride, or fiercely protecting to build confidence. The fierce protection is heavy too. I want to say this really quickly before we go. Scorpio, this full moon is in Scorpio. I've talked a lot about Leo because that is a very predominant energy right now for a lot of reasons, but I want to wrap this up by talking about Scorpio. Sidereal Scorpio is the protector. Whether or not you have that placement in your birth chart, the function of that is to emotionally protect you. It is to keep you from losing yourself in the group. Scorpio isolates in order to find their own emotional center and truth. And sometimes in that isolation, they realize that, they're vibing with a group and they can re-emerge from that place of really knowing what they feel. But see, some of us never get that space alone. And even when we do, we don't bring our truth back with us when we re-emerge. So fiercely protecting means to say that in this collective moment, revolution begins in the body. Y'all gonna hear me preach this till the day I die. My last words on my deathbed are going to be revolution begins in the body, because everybody is always asking me, what do we do? How do we change? And I'm telling you that a lot of your preconceptions about revolution are leaving you immobilized and powerless and docile and accepting the status quo because it feels like too much, because it is. And so when I'm preaching and teaching to you that revolution begins in the body, I'm telling you that there's a butterfly effect. There is a ripple effect that comes from standing in your truth to say, while everybody is acting like that thing feels good, I know it hurts and I'm not afraid to say ouch. Yeah, I'm touching back on the new moon in Taurus, but we're still here in this cycle. Being able to say ouch while everybody else is acting like something feels good actually gives other people permission to say ouch. Part of the reason in stories so many trans people come to know themselves is because they bear witness to other trans people saying, ouch, that the gender assigned at birth does not fit with their subjective experience of themselves. And it gives name to the pain that they feel by having to deny and reject their lived experience and also not having the language for it. And so revolution begins in the body because it is inherently infectious. When you reject conforming to the thing you know is hurtful, hurting you, you are naming somebody else's pain and you are giving them the opportunity to say ouch with you. And when we all say ouch together, that's revolution. Literally. Yeah, we need organization, we need strategy, we need tactic. But guess what? None of that stuff needs to be recreated, because as long as there has been enslavement, whether chattel or labor slavery, as long as there has been the existence of whiteness and white supremacy, as long as there has been the existence of patriarchy and male entitlement to power and dominance over all else, there have been people imagining, strategizing, writing, thinking, singing, dancing, acting, ideas, and real possibilities for change and resistance of these things. So you don't need to go rethink about how, people already did that. Pick up a book, listen to the people who have studied and already know that. Your job is to say ouch when it hurts. And that's that. That's that. Thank you for joining me on the Divination for Liberation podcast. I will see you in 2 weeks for the new moon in Gemini, and this will be another very, very, very intense, energetic shift in terms of topics we're focused on and the tools we collectively have to work with to navigate the moment. I always end my podcast giving an update on COVID, as one of the things that I do as the People's Oracle is to track COVID waves using my tools of divination. And we are still in a lull in the States, as I predicted. Long term, I think that we are getting to a safer place. I'm not saying that COVID is going to be gone, because I don't know that it ever disappears from circulation. However, we are long-term getting to a safer place that only gets safer as we get through 2025, 26, and 27. However, we are going to have another surge, and it is beginning very, very, very slowly in some places now. The time period that you need to be extra cautious is July, August, and September, and possibly again in November and December. I don't think November, let me talk about that when we get there. But July, August, September is the moments that you need to be cautious. Extra asterisk on August. Cautious means that you should be masking in indoor places, regardless of if there is a crowd or anyone with you, and outdoors when it is crowded. This is what is going to protect you from catching COVID for however many times you've had it or not have it. And you want to protect yourself. If you want to know why, we can have a conversation about that later. But I'm doing my due diligence for the public. So remember, protect yourself, protect your family. And yeah, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.